You're watching the History Fella channel. In this video we're looking at the New York City draft riots. The New York City draft riots, which took place in July 13th to the 16th of 1863. These were sometimes referred to as the Manhattan Draft Riots and known at the time as the Draft Week. The riots were violent disturbances in Lower Manhattan, widely regarded as the culmination of working class discontent with new laws that had been passed by Congress that year to draft men to fight in the ongoing American Civil War. The riots remain the largest civil and most racially charged urban disturbance in American history. According to Toby Joyce, the riot represented a civil war within the city's Irish community, in that mostly Irish-American rioters confronted police, soldiers and pro-war politicians, and these were also a considerable extent from the local Irish immigrant community. President Abraham Lincoln diverted several regiments of militia and volunteer troops after the Battle of Gettysburg to control the city. The rioters were overwhelmingly Irish working-class men who did not want to fight in the Civil War and resented that wealthier men who could afford to pay a $300 commutation fee to hire a substitute. These were then spared from the draft. At the time, a typical labourer's wage was between $1 and $2 a day, and the fee was the equivalent to $7,000 in 2022. Initially intended to express anger at the draft, the protest turned into a race riot against the African Americans by Irish rioters. The Irish resented the fact that free blacks were paid more than them and did not need to fear being drafted, whereas the Irish could only avoid the draft by paying $300. The official death toll was listed at either 119 or 120 individuals. Conditions in the city were such that Major General John E. Wool, commander of the Department of the East, said on July the 16th that martial law ought to be proclaimed, but I have no such sufficient force to enforce it. The military did not reach the city until the second day of rioting, by which time the mobs had ransacked or destroyed numerous public buildings. 2 Protestant churches, the homes of various abolitionists or sympathizers, many black homes, and the Colored Orphan Asylum at 45th Street and 5th Avenue, which was burned to the ground. The area's demographics changed as a result of the riot. Many black residents left Manhattan permanently, with many moving to Brooklyn. By 1865, the black population had fallen below 11,000. And this was for the first time since 1820. New York's economy was tied to the South. By 1822, nearly half of its exports were cotton shipments. In addition, upstate textile mills processed cotton in manufacturing. New York had such a strong business connection with the South that on January the 7th, 1861, Mayor Fernando Wood, a Democrat, called on the city's Board of Aldermen to declare the city's independence from Albany and from Washington. He said that this would have had the whole and united support of the southern states. When the Union entered the war, New York City had many sympathizers with the South. The city was also a continuing destination of immigrants. Since the 1840s, most were from Ireland and Germany. In 1860, nearly 25% of New York City's population was German-born, and many did not speak English. During the 1840s and 1850s, journalists had published sensational accounts directed at the white working class, dramatizing the evils of interracial socialization. It also looked at relationships and marriages. Reformers joined the effort. Newspapers carried derogatory portrayals of black people and ridiculed black aspirations for equal rights in voting, education, and employment. The Democratic Party's Tammany Hall political machine had been working to enroll immigrants as US citizens so they could vote in local elections, and had strongly recruited from the Irish. In March 1863, with the war continuing, Congress passed the Enrollment Act to establish a draft for the first time, as more troops were needed. In New York City and other locations, new citizens learned that they were expected to register for the draft to fight for their new country. Black men were excluded from the draft as they were largely not considered citizens, and wealthier white men could pay for substitutes. New York political offices, including the mayor, were historically held by Democrats before the war, but the election of Abraham Lincoln as president had demonstrated the rise in Republican political power nationally. Newly elected New York City Republican Mayor George Opdyke was mired in profiteering scandals in the months leading up to the riots. The Emancipation Proclamation of January 1863 alarmed much of the white working class in New York, who feared there'd be freed slaves that would migrate to the city and add further competition to the labour market. There had already been tensions between black and white workers since the 1850s, particularly at the docks, with free blacks and immigrants competing for low-wage jobs in the city. In March 1863, white longshoremen refused to work with black labourers and rioted, attacking 200 black men. If you found the information in this video informative, please feel free to like and subscribe to the channel.